Hi, my name is Jacob, and this is my Journey in Truth video newsletter for Monday, February 5, 2018. If you're watching this video through my Instagram account, please click on the or copy and paste the Facebook link below to be navigated to my Facebook page, Journey in Truth, where you can watch the full featured video. So the topic for, this week's theme will be an introduction on who the Israelites of the Bible are. So in this week's presentation, we'll learn who are the 12 tribes of Israel. We'll learn their ancient history. Then I'll present you with the 10 commandments of the Bible that were specifically given to the Israelites. And I'll delve deeper into each commandment so that you can learn how each commandment is applicable in your life. And I'll use examples to elaborate on that. And then I'll present you with all of the blessings and the value that God added to the Israelites when they kept his commandments. And conversely, we'll go through the curses that fell upon them when they broke God's commandments, or when they didn't follow his commandments. And then I'll present you with the Israelites' recent history spanning the last 200 years. And then finally, we'll learn how they managed to travel all the way from the modern day Middle East to the American continent, such as North America, Central America, and South America several hundred years ago, well before Christopher Columbus ever touched foot in the United States. So with that being said, today's teaching will cover identifying who the 12 tribes of Israel are, confirming that they are black using scholarly data from the United Nations. And then also I'll confirm that Jesus was black, and I'll present that to you using the book of Revelation, because in the book of Revelation it clearly lists Jesus as being a black man. So those are my objectives. So let's get started. So I'm reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. And it reads, "Now these are the names of the children of Israel." So Israel was actually a man. His name was Jacob before God blessed him and changed his name to Israel. And during this time in Exodus, Jacob and his family, his nation of Israel, they were living among the Egyptians. Now, Jacob, or Israel, he had 12 children. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. So I'm going to list them for you. And again, these are in the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Jesus was from the tribe of Judah. Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Joseph. Now, later on, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh would come from Joseph, but the main tribes are these 12 tribes. Now, the other thing that's important to note is approximately 900 years or so before Jesus came, or before Christ, the kingdom of Israel was split into two kingdoms. You had the kingdom of Judah in the north, and then you had the kingdom of Israel in the south. And the kingdom of Israel was comprised of these 11 other tribes except the kingdom of Judah. And then again, Jesus came from the kingdom of Judah, from the tribe of Judah. That's why, one of the reasons why he was known as the Lion of Judah. So now, I'm going to preface this. So now I'm reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 9. But let me preface this. So you had the Israelites multiplying, and they were thriving in this region. God was blessing them the way he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that their seed would be as numerous as the sand of the seashore. So anyhow, So the Pharaoh, or, the equivalent of the king or the president of Egypt at the time, the Pharaoh, he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we, meaning they outnumbered them. He said, come on, let us deal wisely with them in verse 10. He says, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us. And so get them up out of the land. So what he's saying here is they're thinking strategically about these Israelites. They see them multiplying and they're thinking, man, let's handle this right now. So they wanted to prevent any possibility of the Israelites overthrowing them. That's basically what Pharaoh is seeing here. But then what happens is, so they take them into captivity and they're having them do hard labor, anything having to do with, construction, again, very labor intensive. But what Pharaoh found was the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And the Egyptians and Pharaoh, they were grieved because of this. Like they didn't know what to do with them. So then he came up with an idea in controlling their population. And this is confirmed in verse 22. What he decides to do is he puts out a directive. Let me read it to you first. He says, and Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born, ye shall cast into the river. Any male baby that's born, any son, he put out a directive that the family needed to cast them into the river. But if it was a female baby, they can keep it alive. Again, he's trying to control the population by minimizing the number of males in their families. So now I'm going to go down to chapter 2, and I'm going to preface this for you in chapter 2. And I'm going to paraphrase, excuse me. So basically, from the tribe of Levi, remember Levi was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, there came a man and a woman from the same tribe, they basically, they were married, and the woman conceived and she bore a son. And when she saw that he was a goodly child, she held him for 3 months, meaning there was something special about this child. So she didn't do what Pharaoh commanded them to do. She kept the baby. So when she could no longer hide the baby, she put him in a makeshift ark that she made that was waterproof. She put pitch on it to make sure that it was waterproof. And she put the child in it. And anyhow, to make a very long story short, Pharaoh's daughter ends up getting her hands on this baby. And then she ends up finding out who the mother is. She gives the baby back to the mother and says, look, I'll financially help you to raise the child, but then when he's grown up, bring him back to me. So that's what happened. So then when her baby grew up, she took him back to, when he became a young adult, she took him back to Pharaoh's daughter, and she officially took him into the family, claiming that he was her son. In fact, she gave him the name. The Egyptians gave him the name Moses. She said, the reason she gave him the name Moses was, she said, because I drew him out of the water. This is confirmed in Exodus chapter 2, verse 10. So let me stop here. And just to briefly summarize, you had the Israelites in captivity with the Egyptians. And so they lived together for a long time. I don't have the exact number, of years that they were living in captivity with the Egyptians. I don't have that. But we know that the Israelites were living in captivity, and Pharaoh's daughter claimed that Moses was her son. He became royalty within the Egyptian family. So keep that in mind. Now I'm going to jump down to my next key point here. So in 1974, UNESCO got together with the leading world experts on Egyptology. And UNESCO is the highest institution in the world that is able to decide on these matters. There's no institution bigger than UNESCO. So at the conclusion of this meeting, they reasoned that Egypt was strictly a black civilization. This isn't anyone's opinion. This is a matter of fact by the leading Egyptologists in the world at that time. Again, they met in Cairo in 1974. Now, even further than that, if you're to look at Egyptian artifacts, Egyptian paintings, statues, you look at them and you go, "Oh man, I'm looking at someone who's you're accustomed to calling a black person," and they were right. I mean, no one argued with them; they were absolutely right. So now, let me ask you this question. We know that the modern day, you look at the modern day Israelites, they're actually Ashkenazi Jews who are European. They're not from the 12 tribes of Israel. And they admit this, by the way. They know they're not. So let's imagine for a moment that Moses was a white man. Okay, fine. Let's say he didn't look like one of these white Jews. Maybe he looked more Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, right? You've seen them. Do you think that the Pharaoh would believe that Moses was the son of his daughter if he looked anything but black? And then even more than that, imagine the people in Egypt, the Egyptians. Don't you think they would be outraged to see someone who looks like a modern day Ashkenazi Jew, or even a Middle Eastern guy like me? I'm Middle Eastern. Or any Middle Eastern from that region who didn't look anything but black. Do you think they would believe for a second that was the Pharaoh's daughter's son? Absolutely not. So there's evidence right there confirming that in order for Moses to have passed as being the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, he had to resemble what these Egyptians looked like. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stood a chance. Pharaoh would have killed him because he would have knew, hey, my daughter is housing these Hebrew babies when I put out a directive ordering them to kill any male boys. Anyway, now I'm digressing, but you get the point. So anyhow, let me move on to key point number 3. And I'm going to read to you from the book of Revelation. So if you don't know what the book of Revelation is, it's written by John. They call him John the Revelator, but John was one of the apostles. And when John wrote Revelation, he was being held as a prisoner in the island of Patmos by the Romans. He was basically waiting to die. They were going to execute him. And so he had this revelation. Now, pay very close attention to the first few words that I'm going to read to you. Now, he opens the book in Revelation 1. And what it means is it's the revealing, the revelation, the revealing of Jesus Christ. Now, listen to his opening statement. This is verse 1. He says, the revelation of Jesus Christ. He's saying the revealing. Jesus Christ is revealing himself in this book. And he says, which God gave unto him, to John, to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. And then I'm going to jump down to verse 3. He says, blessed is he that readeth, and he that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. Now I'm going to jump down to verse 8. And he says, now this is Jesus. He says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is, which was, and which is to come, the Almighty. Now we know that this is Jesus speaking because he says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord. So now we know this is Jesus talking to John. Now I'm going to jump down. I'm going to jump down to verse 12. So this entire time, all John hears is this voice. So now he says, and I turned to see the voice that spake to me. So he's turning around and he says, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. Now I'm going to jump down to verse 13, and he says, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, meaning right in that area where I saw the 7 golden candlesticks, he says, I saw one like unto the Son of Man. That's Jesus Christ. That's how Jesus always referred to himself, the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot. He was wearing a garment from his neck down to his feet. And then he says, and a girt about the paps with a golden griddle. Golden griddle is kind of like a belt. It's around his waist. It's made out of gold. He was wearing a golden griddle. Now, pay attention to verses 14 and 15. Otherwise, you'll miss this. He says, his head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were a flame of fire. Now, if you look at a black man, his head and his hair, their hair is woolly to begin with. They're the only race in the world that has woolly hair. So he's saying his head and his hairs were white like wool. Now Google, Morgan Freeman, or, Google like an old black man, and you'll see their hair is white as snow and it's woolly. This is just naturally who they are. But now here's even further evidence in verse 5. Now listen to what he says. He says, and his feet were like unto fine brass. Fine brass is like a dark brown color. And then he says, and this is the nail in the coffin. He says, as if they burned in a furnace. When you burn something in a furnace, a furnace is blazing hot, right? When you burn something in a furnace, what color does it get? It's going to get black. Whatever you burn in there, I guarantee you by the time it's done burning, it's going to be black. He's saying in his feet, like onto fine brass, as they were burned in a furnace. So now if you compare this image of Jesus to the Roman Catholic Church Jesus that they created, by the way, there is no comparison whatsoever. Even if you start making the connections about the Israelites having to be black 100%. And there's actually more evidence that I plan on presenting to you during the course of this week. But for right now, what I established to you, number one today, was that I identified who the 12 tribes of Israel were. We identified that Moses, who was an Israelite, not only did he become a part of the Egyptian nation, but he was part of royalty. And he must have resembled being the Pharaoh's son somehow. And in order for him to do that, he had to be black. There's no other way. And then I confirmed that the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, not the Egyptians today, but the ancient Egyptians, they were confirmed to be black by the leading experts at the United Nations and Unesco. So there's no argument there. And then lastly, I confirmed to you in John's words, excuse me, let me make that easier. In John's words, in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verses 1 through 15, that Jesus revealed himself to John, and there's no denying he's a black man. So with that being said, I hope this video has added tremendous value to your life. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment below. Thank you for watching, guys. Take care, and God bless you.